come back to it. But right now, we'll talk about Simeon Rice. So he's going into the Ring of Honor, 16th player. Yesterday, he did his press conference. Brian Glazer, who, by the way, was very nice, said we were talking a little bit afterwards, and he's like, he goes, JP, you're a pot stirrer. He goes, I go, oh, you listen to the show? He goes, oh, yeah, listen all the time. He said, he goes, I love the way you keep the conversation going, and you like to stir the pot. He goes, but you do it in a funny way. I'm like, thanks. Appreciate that, Brian. So shout out to Brian Glazer. But he ran through all the numbers for Simeon Rice, the 122 and a half sacks, 8 years in a row, double-digit sacks, one of only 3 players in NFL to do that during that time, and the other guys are in the Hall of Fame. Most of his numbers compare to Hall of Fame, but for whatever reason, he's just probably because the Bucs have enough of those defensive players in there, and they're not going to give them more than the Steelers had and some of these other great defenses. So that's kind of the way it works, and Simeon's the odd man out. And at one point, he's come on the show a lot over the years. He was really pissed off about it, but then he kind of just let it go. And he kind of explained it yesterday. It's like, it's not, when my parents passed in 2015 and 2016, it didn't really matter to me anymore. I chased it all my life, and I just kind of, Evelyn and Henry were their names. And yesterday he got super emotional. And this was not something that you would expect from Simeon Rice, and he said this, a lot of people thought it came easy to me because of the way I look. And let me tell you what, this guy, the Lord made Simeon Rice to be an edge rusher. I mean, 6'7", just this chiseled Adonis, and the work ethic that is MJ-like. One of his heroes, he grew up in Chicago. He had that Michael Jordan work ethic, dedication, and competitive drive. You combine that with a literally an organism like made for rushing the passer, a 7-foot wingspan, 6'7", a nonstop motor. This guy would work out till 10:30 at night if it was a night practice. If it was a day practice, he'd be out there till it was dark. It was unbelievable how this guy would work. And you combine that with a incredible artistic, creative mentality. I mean, he had the body, the drive, the competitive fight, and he combined that with a creative mind, which I think creative minds make the best pass rushers in my estimation. Those guys are just built differently, unless you're Reggie White and you just hump move people. You don't need to be too creative when you're that big and strong. But Simeon did it. He was an artist. He was an artist at what he did, and watching him play was fun. He told so many great stories yesterday. But I apologize for the audio, but I just want you to get a feel for the emotion. It's Simeon I've known him for 20 plus years, and he's a happy-go-lucky guy, never too emotional, doesn't take anything too seriously at all. And to see him get this emotional was startling, absolutely startling and wonderful in the same breath. So this was Sim just after Brian brought him up to the podium, and he was getting ready to speak. Again, apologies for the audio.
That's all that. I want to be a basketball player. I was really good at it.
I'm going to take it back to the beginning. Here we go. For those of you listening to the podcast, he's holding his heart, fighting back the tears. It was.
I don't know if I really ever reconciled my father passed away.
And so what he said there was, I never really reconciled my parents passing. And then he went on to say that, he played for the love of the game, the competitiveness, wanted to be great. And he wanted to put that shine on his name, on his parents' name, because they worked so hard and did everything for him. And he grew up in, a rough part of South Chicago. Parents keeping kids like that out of the gangs, it ain't easy. It's a lot of sacrifice. It's a lot of sacrifice to keep your kid on the straight and narrow. And it's hard to do, especially when you're as charismatic as Sim is. Every gang wanted a piece of him, I'm sure, right? to keep him in school, focused on doing it, that's a Herculean effort. And I think all those emotions just kind of boiled over and bubbled up, and he couldn't hold it back. And it was wonderful to see. It was wonderful to see how much it meant to him. And he had his little son there, James. He was, I think, 3 years old. He just kept, like Simeon after practice. He kept, like, when Simeon was doing the one-on-ones afterwards, when we all broke off, he was up there on the stage just running in circles, just nonstop, it's like Sim used to run 40s after practice in the heat and over in Disney World and training camp. His son, I'm like, yeah, he's wired just like you, Sim. And he saw his son was looking at. They played the highlights. And his son was like, wow, that's you, Daddy. And I don't know if he'd ever seen that, to be quite honest. And Sim was just kind of like, yeah, this is my life now, his family. My son is everything. And I love being a dad. He went into the movie business, produced a couple of movies, got him into theaters, and just did that thing and did great at it. They're wonderful movies. If you haven't seen them, go watch them. He's a very, very competent and creative and maybe a little bit too artsy for a lot of people. But he's a super brilliant guy. And, yesterday he talked about the Warren Sapp. When he first got here, Sapp was not a welcoming force.
Yeah.
Sapp was, was jealous. He was jealous of Simeon. And they went at it. They went at it a lot. He talked about it. It's like, when he first called, he's supposed to be at a dinner when they were doing the free agent recruiting. And Sapp didn't show up, but he called him. He's like, where you at, dog? You coming to dinner? He says, where are you? So I'm at the dinner. Where are you? I'll call you later. And didn't show up. And then when they started playing together, he would call him out, and it was rough. It was rough going for a while. They did not get along. And finally, Sapp, respected his game, saw what he was doing, and saw, well, wow, this guy could really put us over the top. And, the same way Gruden came in and gave this great defense and offense that could win a Super Bowl, I think this defense needed that shot in the arm. And Brian Glazer mentioned that yesterday. And he was the missing piece because they didn't really have that, that dominant edge rusher.
Yeah.
And you go and you look at the numbers and they're off the charts, 16 and a half sacks, but in one of his years, but he was more than that. How many sacks did he chase into Warren Sapp? A lot, and vice versa. Those guys worked together tremendously well. But you had to have the other, and they never really had that. And Sim was that missing piece on defense that made them absolutely dominant. You go look at those numbers. I think they averaged giving up 10 points a game in the Super Bowl season. 10 points a game, and they scored, I think, 9 touchdowns in the regular season and another 5 in the postseason. I think they had 37 interceptions. The numbers on that defense are just unbelievable. And they finally got an offense with Gruden to make him win a Super Bowl. So, but Sim was that guy. He was, and he talked about the breath, the killers. He called them. He said they had the magic sauce, sauce. And they were, and they just, and that brought it all together. And he's going into the Ring of Honor. Will he get into the Hall of Fame? I think this is kind of timed so that I think he's going to come up for the Veterans Committee in a couple of years. I think once he goes into the Ring of Honor, I don't think you can go into the Hall of Fame until your team puts you in the Ring of Honor. So I think this is the first step. Will he get it? I don't know. The Hall of Fame is weird in that way. We've had Sal Palantonio, who's a big voice in the room, come on and say Simeon absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame. So they've got Sal's vote. They've got Ira Kaufman's vote. So maybe, it took a while for John Lynch to get in. I think 8 or 9 ballots. It took a while for Rondé to get in. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it just takes some time and for people to realize the greatness. But I think as time goes on, they're going to realize that Simeon belongs in the Hall of Fame, and he's a Hall of Fame dude. Mm-hmm. And, he's been very kind to me, been on the show many times, and we'll get him on at some point this week when we nail him down. But he's a free spirit. Yeah. It's like he said to Brian, he's like, I know Brian calls me to do stuff all the time, and I don't always get back to him, but he eventually does. He'll take care of his business.
I had a couple of things I took away from that press conference, watching the video and reading some of the quotes is Number one, the humility.
Yeah.
He's humble while extremely confident at the same
Yeah.
time. For instance, okay, and he is 100% loyal to Chicago, where he grew up. He loves Chicago, and he still loves Chicago.
Yeah.
When they asked him the greatest defense of all time, well, the media and everybody's looking for, it was us, 01, the 01 Bucks. It was no, that's not what he said. He said, and he thought about it. He said, respectfully, I think we're number 2 all time, right behind the 85 Bears. I think it's the Bears and then us, which probably surprised a lot of people, right? But he's probably right. I mean, I don't know who considers that 01 Bucks defense to be above the Bears 85 defense, but it certainly deserves to be up there. And then he talked about when he was talking to Rich McKay during the free agency period before he signed in 01. He told Rich McKay, if you bring me down, you will be in the Super Bowl either this year or next year. Trust me. He said, I could tell. He said, I watched the Bucks play the Rams in that game. And he's talking about the 99 NFC championship game that the Bucks lost. He said, if I would have been playing, you would have won that game.
Yeah.
And what does he do? He comes in and they win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. He was right.
He was right, man.
He was right.
You gotta love that. And you know what? GMs look for that tenacity. Coaches look for that tenacity. And I don't know what was going on with him and the Cardinals. I don't know why they decided not to keep him.
Because they were the Cardinals at the time.
I was going to say, it's either a thing that they're going to cardinal the Cardinals, or it was a money thing.
It was a money thing.
Yeah, because back then
they didn't pay anybody. That old owner. What was his name? Started with a B. I forget. He's just terrible. Cheap personified.
Bidwell.
Yes, thank you.
But it's Bill Bidwell. But what a gem for the Bucks to get, and then for him to become part of the culture over there. And you know what? We're going to be saying the same thing about Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
Here in a few years when his career is over. And
believe it or not, when as I was here, obviously, when they signed Simeon, I believe Rich McKay gave him a $20 million bonus, which was unheard of. And the Glazers, had to pay that cash.
Right.
So that was, I think he had a $37 million contract, but I believe it was a $20 million bonus. And there were people like, oh my God, what are we paying this guy for? What are you
found out real quick.
Yeah.
And he had a pretty consistent career too. He made 2 Pro Bowls with the Cardinals. He made 2 Pro Bowls with the Bucks afterwards.
One
All Pro, Super Bowl, which he could have easily been the Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah,
easily. Yeah. He dominated that game. He dominated. In fact, he dominated the playoffs. He had a strip sack in all the games in the playoffs against San Francisco, against Philadelphia, and in the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that's, talk about dominating. And then those are game-changing plays, which brings us to the current Buccaneers. By the way, the offensive coaches are doing interviews today, so we may have some quotes as we go through the show about that. So we'll bring that to you after we talk to TJ, or maybe during. So we'll definitely keep you updated on that. But there's the argument right now, and you went out and got Hassan Reddick. Now, is Hassan Reddick Simeon Rice? No. But his numbers, oddly enough, very similar in the last 5 years. So double-digit sacks every year except last year when,
throw out last year for Reddick. I don't even want to hear about his year with the Jets.
He's not Simeon Rice, but he brings that element off the edge that we have not had. So to go with this offense, it's kind of different. Because back then we needed an offense to go with that defense. Now we need a defense to go with this offense, right? So what's that secret sauce? What's that going to be? That edge rusher. That edge rusher. You got to have it. And, I mean, a lot of people are like, well, Trey Hendrickson's going to be very expensive. And I don't think the Bucs are doing that. They've got, Hassan Reddick's their guy. But whoever gets him is going to get a hell of a player.
And by the way, the Bengals are doing their best to screw that whole thing up right now.
They're not going to pay him.
Very best.
They're not going to pay him. They're not going to pay him. There's no way but they got to find a trade partner who's willing to give up the trade capital and the money.
And then pay him. Yeah, and then
yeah,
pay
and
him.
then pay him. And it's hard. And at 30 years old, if he wants a 5-year deal, that's going to be hard to do.
Maybe he can go back. Maybe he can go back to the Saints.
I hope
and a lot of people forget he was drafted by the Saints and spent a lot of time in New Orleans and kind of mired around in mediocrity a little bit.
I don't think they were playing him as an edge rusher, were they?
I don't know.
Weren't they playing him inside or something?
Might have been playing tackle. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure they used him as an edge rusher, which is weird.
Screw that up.
Yeah, looking at his build, he's built for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was so fun to watch him play. It was even more fun to talk to him after practices. He brought such an edge to that team. They didn't bring up the Gruden stuff. When he left, when Gruden cut him, he was pissed. He was Gruden. He was not happy with Gruden. And nobody brought that up yesterday. Well, rightfully so. No, we don't need to talk about that. But
are they going to put his name right next to Gruden's in the Ring of Honor?
Maybe.
Funny would that be?
Well, they got to go. They're out of room on the far side.
Yeah.
So they got to go up there. Yeah, Gruden. They're going to be on the same side. So I usually put them next to each other. So maybe they'll start at one end, put Sim at one end, and put Gruden at the other end. So
when they took Gruden out of the Ring of Honor, they took his name down, right? Like it wasn't just covered up. Like they just took it down and then they replaced it with somebody, I'm assuming, because there's a blank spot.
No, it was Bruce Arians. Put
Arians up there. So then when they re-inducted him, they had to put it back up, but in a new spot, right?
I don't know. I don't know if it's back up.
Well, you would think so if he's back in the Ring of Honor.
But I don't know if they've officially.
They haven't inducted him yet.
Well, they're not going to have a ceremony. I think it's going to be more quiet. I think when we show up this year, it's going to be up there. That's what I think.
Huh.
I don't think there's going to be a ceremony or anything like that. They're just going to quietly.
Because they said in February he's back in the Ring of Honor, but they're not going to redo the whole displaying the name and the halftime thing against.
They may do something. They may do something like make him I don't think they want to talk about it, to be quite honest. I think they just want to do it, and that's fine.
So yeah, you show up one week and his name's just there. Like that's.
And by the way, if we've not said this before, shout out to the Glazers. Shout out to the Glazers because those emails took shots at them, and they said, "You know what? The fans want him up there. The fans want him overwhelmingly. They want him up there. We'll eat this one for the fans." And it's good on them. I'm not saying it's the right or wrong decision. I think it's the right decision. I mean, there's no way do you condone what was in those emails. And anyway, that's bad stuff. That's bad stuff.
Yeah.
And when I hear people say, "Oh, everybody," no, we don't. I don't write emails like that. I would never write an email like that. I'm not saying
not
I'm
even
the holier than
beer
thou,
with your buddy,
but I don't do that. I don't write that stuff. I don't say.
So JP, I found this. Apparently, this is where his name was.
Yeah, and I think Arians.
So now Arians is there.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
that makes sense.
So I think Gruden and Rice will go up on the other side. Yeah, but that's. I don't think a lot of owners would do that.
No,
I think their ego would not let them. But they showed deference.
Glazers have never been accused of having overinflated, gigantic egos anyway.
No, they're great. They're great people. I know they got a lot of bad press early on. Stadium stuff, and that's ancient history, man. They have been nothing but awesome owners. And the other night, Brian Ford came out and and Casey Phillips did a presentation at the Tampa Sports Club, and Casey got up there because Brian didn't want to do it because it might look self-serving. So he got Casey up there to do it, and highlighted everything they're doing in the community. Not everything, but a lot of the things. Mm-hmm. And I was just like. She spent 20 minutes talking about this, and it wasn't boring. It was like, this is what we're doing for flag football. She is football convention they just had, which was overwhelmingly successful. The flag football thing they're doing for the girls, the Glazers eye clinic that they do, Glazer Vision, the social justice things they're doing, and they're doing it at targeting, minority kids and doing really positive things for them. They've done what they do in the community is outstanding. It really is. And the Glazers put a lot of money into it. They put their money where their mouth is. They don't just do these half-ass events. And when they're doing these flag football events, the girls get everything the players get. The trainers are out there, the Gatorade, water, all that stuff, and that ain't cheap. And they make a commitment to it, and they've done a phenomenal job with all of that stuff. So very impressive.
Nice.
All right. Speaking of very impressive, the man is in. The great TJ Rives is here, part of that Bucks organization that we were just fawning over. Yesterday was a great deal with Simeon Rice.
Yes.
Were you in the back of the room? I don't know. I was in the front
not,
of the room.
I was not there. You were present. I was not accounted for on that. However, I look forward to Simeon Rice getting honored later this year. Not coincidentally against his old team, the Cardinals. Of course, there can't be that much animus, and we're talking about 25 years ago.
No,
that they wouldn't pay him, and the Buccaneers would pay him.
Yeah, big thanks to Bidwell being cheap. Right?
Hey, I've often said this, and you guys love this. Sometimes you do things on your own. Sometimes you do things through the stupidity and idiocy of others. And so, if the Cardinals don't want that guy, and you do, it's kind of like Leonard Fournette on the eve of the Super Bowl season in 2020. Jacksonville cut him, got nothing for him, and he helped the Buccaneers win a Super Bowl. So
yeah, we didn't even have to trade for Simeon.
No,
right?
no, it was a free agent deal that Rich McKay was able to do. So
wasn't it a $20 million bonus?
Something guaranteed.
And there were people were like, "Oh, that's too much for Simeon Rice."
This is at a time in which nobody was getting $15 million. Quarterbacks weren't, much less a defensive lineman, a pass rusher. So I remember that whole time period. And you love me for a lot of reasons.
Yes.
Timmy, I'm glad you're safe after the other night with all the craziness with the storms.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad you're good on that front.
It was scary. It went right over my house.
Yeah, the tornadic activity.
Did you have a tornado go by your house?
Yeah.
Right over the top of my house.
Holy shiz, how did I miss that?
All of my lawn furniture is gone.
So who do you build?
And two of the dogs.
How do you? I was going to say, good Lord.
Well, they were with me.
How do you bill that? Who do you invoice on? Hey, I need new lawn furniture. What does that go under?
I just find somebody's I like in the neighborhood and I just go steal it. No.
Or the other thing is that because it's a swirl, maybe somebody else's lawn furniture ended up in your area, and you can just
didn't happen. But I still don't know where mine is.
It's like Simeon Rice. Yeah.
We planted Simeon. All right, so you love me for the stories. So the Bucks signed him as a free agent in 2001, and I'm working for the flagship radio station at that time, doing 5-day-a-week sports radio on the old 1010 The Team. You and I have talked about this before, and that's the Buccaneers flagship. So they end up doing a deal for a Simeon Rice radio show. All right, and I had met him in and around the press conference. He sort of knew who I was, hi, hello. I think I had him on the radio in and around the time that we signed. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But I will testify here at the altar of the FanStream JP show. I was the host of the inaugural Simeon Rice radio show.
Oh,
and
wow.
you love these. I'm talking about the very first one, because we had not figured out, was I going to do the show every week? Was somebody else on Buccaneers radio going to do it? I think our man Ronnie Night Train Lane ended up being the full-time host. He'll have to tell you that part of the story, but I'm the host for the first show, and they had done the show. We'll give them a free plug because they've been in bankruptcy and who knows how much longer they're going to be around. Red Lobster for the seafood lover and you. Red Lobster had bought the Simeon Rice show live. All right, so we go to the Red Lobster, and I'm there probably about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, something before the show. It's 10 till he's not there. It's 5 till he's not there. We finally confirm he's on the way. There's some Buck fans that are there. I'd love to tell you there was 100 there. There was, 300. There was probably a dozen, maybe 15. And of course, they want autographs. They want pictures. So he comes in, and I get to know him. I get to talk to him for a couple of minutes. And I said, one of the first things that I always do with this role, especially when it's a new guy, is I say, listen, I am not the media. We talked about this all the time. That I am not here to put you on trial and to find out why you sucked in Arizona and why the Bucks would want you. It's my job here to just talk to you about being with the Buccaneers and a new start and a new situation with Tony Dungy. And, oh, by the way, you're going to get to play with Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks and John Lynch and Rondé Barber. I mean, he had to feel like, is this heaven or is this Iowa in the cornfield that he gets to come play with this team? All right, so just to wrap up the story, the show begins, and I mean, we talked about everything except Buccaneer football. Exactly. As you know, I see you nodding.
Yes.
So we talked about where he lived in Arizona and how a dry heat is different than humidity. And he started trying to explain the difference in humidity. And I'm going along with it. And then we talked about, he talked about growing up in Chicago and being cold and snow. I'm just remembering it came back to me watching him yesterday and how emotional he was about all of this. He started talking about watching great pass rushers, talking about Lawrence Taylor and Bruce Smith and all of his contemporaries. And then he started talking about basketball, and we started talking about the NBA.
Oh, yeah.
We started talking about the NBA on the show. He's a big basketball guy because he and Sapp had gotten into arguments about the Orlando Magic and the Shaq Magic versus his like Michael Bulls or the Phoenix Suns where he had been. JP, I swear to you, for at least 30 minutes, I don't know the first 30 minutes that we talked about Buccaneer football or anything.
Probably not.
And then we started talking about alien life, and we started talking about all kinds of. And I'm looking at my ball, and I'm looking at him, and we're just letting him go. Planet Simeon, we're letting him go on that. Now, gradually, we warmed up, and we talked a little bit about, hey, it's pretty cool. You're going to play next to Warren Sapp on the Buccaneer defense, and what about Tony Dungy and Monty Kiffin's defense? So I'm just saying to you that the first Simeon Rices, and I think he did shows for a couple of years back in that time frame, like 01 and 02. I was the guinea pig. I was the guy that went out there the first time with Simeon on. So I still remember we were doing a preseason game. All right, later that summer. This show was probably an August show, and it may have been like later that week or the next week. We have a preseason game, and I'm doing the preseason game hosting for Channel 44. I think it was the first season. This may have been the second season. Actually, it was probably the second season. It's the last year that Channel 44 had the preseason games before Channel 8 got them. And I was the preseason host. And our buddy, the coach, Doug Graber, is part of the broadcast. And he is down interviewing players with me during the game as players came out of the game as an extra role to be an analyst. So Graber comes over and he's talking to Simeon Rice, and he has the headset on and the mic, and I can't hear the interview. I just see them talking. And so we get done, and he says bye to him. Simeon doesn't have the pads on. He's not playing in the game, so this had to be like the first game. And I said, how did it go? He goes, I don't understand a damn thing that he was talking about. He goes, I asked him about the defense, and I don't know about the answer. And he goes, I asked him about rushing off the edge, and he started talking about heat and humidity again. And he goes, I don't know what he was talking about.
And the funny part,
we love him for that, though. Bravo, we love him for that.
Well, here's a quick story. So we used to go and get sound bites from everybody after practice, right? So we'd go, me and Bob Hansen, Channel 8, we'd go get, we'd stop Simeon, and he's like, "What's up, brother? What's up? How you doing? How you living?" And then we start talking, and then I'd ask him a couple football questions, and he'd start going off on Planet Simeon. I'm like, and I turn to Hansen, I go, God,
do we have anything we can use?
Soundbite, bro. I'm like, I don't. We're not gonna be able to use. So, and I don't even know what the hell he just said. Like, and then I go back and I start editing it, and I'm like, oh, this makes perfect sense now. Like when I had to play it 3 times, but every word he used was spot on. And I thought he was just spewing big words to make himself sound like he was smart or something. I'm like, holy crap, he brought that all together.
Yes, and I just thought of something else. He's big, and I think still into Star Wars.
Yeah,
all right?
Yeah.
And he showed up, and he gave gifts of like lightsabers to all of the defensive linemen and stuff. And we started talking about Star Wars at the Red Lobster. They got the tank with all the death row inmate lobsters that are in the front lobby. And we got
man, that lobster. Imagine what's going through that lobster's head.
Exactly.
Right,
we're talking about everything but you just jogged me that he started talking Star Wars because one of the movies had been out that summer or whatever. But it was great. But now on to what he meant on the field. I think the argument can be made that I mean, they had amazing players, but he was as valuable as anybody off of that right edge in that Buccaneer, Tony Dungy, Monty Kiffin defense. The dude was an amazing pass rusher for that 5 or 6 years of his heyday here, which you back it up to the last 2 or 3 years in Arizona. He was as menacing as Bruce Smith or as Michael Strahan, his contemporaries coming off the end of the line of scrimmage. You could have given him the MVP of Super Bowl 37. Dexter Jackson got it for the 2 interceptions in the first half, but Simeon Rice had a couple of sacks. He had another sack on the 2-point play that they don't officially count, by the way, as an official sack in the game stats. Yeah. He sacked Gannon on a 2-point play in the third quarter of the game. So he essentially had 3 sacks in the Super Bowl, and
that was a strip sack.
Yes, he was menacing off the end in those wins over Philadelphia or over the Rams or over the 49ers in the playoff games, the divisional games, because remember the division switched. His second year in 2002 is when the division switched. So he was terrorizing like Jake Delhomme of the Panthers, and I can't even remember who that was Vic in Atlanta. He and Derek Brooks clobbering and Sapp clobbering Michael Vick. And then the Saints every week. Simeon had close to 70 sacks with the Buccaneers. I think it was like 68.5, 69 and a half, whatever it was. So great on him that he's in the Ring of Honor. And I love that we get to do this where you can't tell the story of the great Buccaneer defense of the late 90s and the early 2000s without that guy, JP.
No question. It was a brilliant move by Rich McKay. And it put, because people were like, why are you spending money on the defense? Like, you got to do something with this offense. But he knew that, hey, they had to have, that was the missing piece. So we got to give Rich McKay a lot of credit for that as well. So yeah, Sim was unlike any player I've ever covered. So.
Well, and Brian Glazer's making a strong point for him to go to the Hall of Fame. He's openly campaigning now for him to be a Hall of Famer. He mentioned a lot of that in his the presser yesterday, and or what was it, Thursday? I don't remember.
Yeah, yesterday. Yesterday was it. Yes,
yesterday. And he brought out, he had more sacks from 96 to 05 than guys like Strahan, who's in the Hall of Fame, Jason Taylor, who's in the Hall of Fame. So he's making a very valid argument.
I'm looking for what he signed for in free agency.
5 years, $28 million.
And how much of it was guaranteed, Timmy? If you have it, it was probably something like that. All right, so wait a minute. 5 years, up to $34 million that he could have made. And I'm looking for what this, because again,
37.
The quarterbacks weren't making that kind of money back in the day.
And I think it was a $20 million bonus.
Or guaranteed money, one of the two.
Yeah. It was one of the, and I remember Rich McKay getting a lot of crap for that, like way overpaid for Simeon Rice. He doesn't play the run, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I'm looking at the old Lakeland Ledger, which does that paper even exist anymore? The Ledger out in Lakeland has the article that I'm reading that Rice agreed to play. I remember this part too. There was a salary cap controversy because of what Rich McKay had done. Rice agreed to play for $1 million guaranteed in 2001. And then there were accelerators in the contract that would guarantee him $8 million in 2002, which again is like unheard of for a defensive end. And I'm reading on here on if there's any other particulars, but I still remember there was some back and forth about whether the contract was legal because they had promised him so much guaranteed money later in the deal with accelerator clauses, which he met because he was getting, now everybody 13, does that. Yes, correct. He was getting 13, 15, 17 sacks a season. Of course he was worth that. But how about that? They got him, JP, for $1 million guaranteed the first year in 2001 on how they did the deal. So it was a tremendous job by Rich McKay because he had to fit Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, Mike Allstott, all those guys under a salary cap and make it work. But
they retooled his contract in 2003. So he signed a 5-year deal in 2001.
All right.
They reworked gave him basically an extension in 2003 for 5 years, right at $35 million with a $6 million bonus.
And most of it probably guaranteed too.
Yeah,
he was worth it. Yeah,
so that raised his salary from right around 5.5 to almost $7 a year.
And his thing was leverage. I mean, he could get low and get around you I mean, he was just quick, and he
It was
also
that wingspan, though. It's
yes, and the
he had a
wingspan of being
7-foot
able to
wingspan where he could,
the Simeon wipe the chop to get the ball out. And I still remember this. I don't know if you ever heard about this or got video. I don't know that anybody ever got video of this, but there was apparently a bet, a substantial bet on whether Sapp, who could literally walk on his hands like 50 or 60 yards, we're talking about handstand and walk, that he and Simeon Rice had a wager going, and they finally settled it, and Simeon Rice walked farther on his hands, I believe, as the story goes. He walked like 70 or 80 yards down the football field on a handstand. Hello. That's the truth.
That is insane. That's strength, balance, athleticism.
Yes.
That's incredible.
I mean, try to do, for all of us, we'd end up probably in the urgent care if you try to do a handstand.
Yes.
Then try to move. Try to take one paw step and think about that. That's crazy. But that's what kind of athlete he was, and he was in tears there yesterday, and I'm so looking forward to him being around all of this. He was last around when they honored the 0-2 team back a couple of years ago, and I remember being around him and talking to him then when they had the 20th anniversary of the 0-2 Super Bowl team, and they honored him at Raymond James Stadium. And he's been around like Sapp's Hall of Fame, Brooks's Hall of Fame. He's been around. So
did you know that there's a funny moment in the press conference yesterday? He was talking about, and he goes, I remember playing in Philly, and I think Rondé got a pass. I don't know if he scored. I don't know, and I was like, Sim, did you not know that Rondé scored in Philadelphia?
That's the play.
He goes, I don't know, man. It's like he scored a lot of touchdowns. And Rondé was in the back of the room. I pointed the camera. He's like, oh, my dog's up there. He goes, yeah, I remember one time, I think it was a 49ers game. He had a pick six and I got a penalty. And Rondé's like, yeah, I remember. Rondé came up and grabbed his face mask. But that's Sim because he doesn't watch football. He played the game.
Yes.
He wanted to be the best. He couldn't even tell you who was in his division. I guarantee you, he couldn't even tell you who was in his division. He's one of those guys that doesn't think in details. He thinks in concepts. Like, we were the best defense of our time. That's the way he doesn't. He's not one of those guys. He couldn't, except maybe some of his own stats. He could, because people tell him all the time. When they're talking about the Hall of Fame, he wouldn't even know. He didn't take his work home with him. No. No.
And one other point, I'm just through my own head. I knew we were going to do this conversation. Wasn't he trying to make movies? And I think
he did. He produced 2 movies. Yeah,
he produced movies as well. Yep. I mean, this is a bright guy. We should not
got 2 in the theaters, and if you don't know how hard that is, it's extremely difficult.
We should just illuminate that he was a bright guy. We're not making him out to be stupid. He's different, and he was a tremendous player for this team. And great that the Buccaneers are honoring him. And you saw he was in tears yesterday, remembering his parents who passed away, that helped him get literally out of the ghetto, out of the projects in the Chicago area, to then play at the University of Illinois and eventually end up here in Tampa Bay with the Buccaneers in a very romantic time where the Buccaneers were rocking and rolling back in the early 2000s.
He told a story about, he would be, he'd be out there dancing. Like when they have play in the TV timeouts, they'll be playing music, and Sim would be out there dancing. It's 100 degrees, feels like 110, fourth quarter. And he said offensive linemen would tell him, after the game or later, when they see him down the road, he'd go like, dude, I'm out there about ready to die, and I'm looking over at you, and you're dancing in the fourth quarter. He goes, that was so. It's like, this guy ain't had enough yet.
Psychology.
It's exactly what
and
it was.
And he would get ready. He'd get down in the stance, and I saw others do this before him, but he'd do it, and others have done it since, where he would start doing, I'm going to get in the shot. He'd start doing this to the crowd, like, let's go, get loud, while he's in the stance getting ready to take off. With how big a deal that was. So this is,
and I didn't know I didn't know, maybe I just forgot, but I knew him and Sapp didn't really get along in the beginning, but he told some stories yesterday. Like, it was really, really bad. Like, it almost came to blows a few times.
Well, maybe they had some clashes, and then they had the bet for walking on the hands, and
I didn't know
kind
that
of stuff. That's what you have me here for.
I will tell you the most impressive thing he's done, I guess especially after retirement, is he's 51 years old. I'm 54.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
How in the world do you do
Yeah,
that,
good
man?
luck-
I
good
can't
luck
even
with that.
imagine.
Good luck
My
with that.
youngest is
Kid was running
14, and
around.
I don't like him.
No, and he loves it. He loves being a
I
father.
know
was
it. That's
texting him
great.
when I was texting him the other night. That's what he said. I was like, "What are you doing now?" He's like, "I'm just a dad, man, and I love it. I just love being a dad." And he's
There
playing
you
with
go.
talking toys, and and he'll be great at it because he's great at everything he
Amazing.
does. You know,
Love it with him. All right, what
But-
else?